I recently had the pleasure of listening to Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass and The Serviceberry, speak at my college alma mater. And she is such a warm-hearted, genuine speaker that you can't help but leave one of her talks feeling optimistic about how we humans might be able to connect to the natural world. One of her proposals in particular really stuck with me as something that we could use during this Earth Week. She talked about how we often refer to plants, animals in the natural world using the pronoun it. And this is often because we don't want to overuse he when we don't know an animal's gender and ignore the feminine. But unfortunately, the consequence of referring to something as an it separates it from the human world, makes it something other than human. And so Dr. Kimmerer, her solution to this was that she borrowed a word from her native Potawatomi language, and then she shortened the word and used the end of it. The word is something that means a being of the earth, and she shortened it to just ki and said we can use ki as our pronoun to refer to any creature. And one of the profound pieces of this is that in the Potawatomi language, one of the ways that you can create a plural is to add N to the end of a word. And so what if we referred to all of Earth's creatures as kin? Hello, I'm Nicole Travillis-Fravel, and this is Wildwood Teaching, and this is Earth Week. April 22nd is the day that we humans set aside each year to celebrate our planet Earth and recommit ourselves to its stewardship. How do we approach this stewardship with young children? And what is the best way that we early childhood educators can go about creating future Earth stewards? So another thing that Dr. Kimmerer mentioned in her speech is that oftentimes people avoid leaning into Indigenous ways of relating to the earth out of fear. We fear that we will inadvertently be disrespectful or that we'd be appropriating something that isn't ours. And that's completely understandable. But she mentioned that unfortunately, the outcome of this fear is that then we don't teach Indigenous ways of knowing. And then if we don't teach it, this Indigenous knowledge disappears. And so one of the Indigenous practices that I'd like to lean into is the one that Dr. Kimmerer mentioned. It's reciprocity. Right? It has to do with our relationship to the earth, right? We aren't put on this earth to be takers of the land. We are of the land. And we have just as much responsibility to give back to the land, to help it flourish as we use its resources. So Dr. Kimmerer mentioned that how we take matters, and we can model this for young children. So I often ask the children to have a plan before they pick something. As we're walking through the forest, are you grabbing at the ferns and pulling them just because you need something to grab? Or do you have an idea of what you might use them for? And it's okay for this plan to be a toddler or preschool level plan, right? They might plan to pull two fern fronds to use them as wings, right? So they can turn into birds. or maybe they just want to make a pretty bouquet for their parents, right? And it's also okay for their plan to change. Maybe they had a plan and then they decided they don't need it and they're putting it back down on the ground. It's okay because we're not striving for perfection with 2-year olds, 3-year olds, 4-year olds. What my goal is that I just want them to think about it, right? I want them to think about our collective responsibility to nature and to think about the fact that if we don't have a use for a fern, it has another use. The plant itself needs its leaves to flourish. Or a deer might walk by after us and want to eat those leaves. Or another human might want to walk by and just enjoy the same beauty that we're enjoying. Another thing that we can model for children is a first do no harm strategy for how we interact with the natural world. And so this is why in preschool we have rules about how we look and don't touch the small wild creatures that we are encountering in the forest, and why we strive mainly to harvest our collections from the plants that are already on the ground. And why, even then, right, we're going to notice, are those things, do they look like they are arranged purposefully on the ground? Could they be a nest? Could some other creature already be using them? And therefore, we're not going to touch it. This doesn't mean that we don't ever collect things, that we never pick things. It just means, or even that we don't ever touch worms or insects. Children are kinesthetic learners. They really do need to touch things. And we don't want to give them the idea that nature is fragile, that nature is something other that we can't touch. But what does mean that we only touch or we only pick once we've taken that time to notice what other purpose that wildlife might have. Once we notice how everything is interacting within our community, once we've talked about the needs and feelings of all of our kin, right? And then once we make sure that that touching is safe, not only for us, but for the kin that we are interacting with. Last thing we can do is model gratitude for what the earth gives us. Dr. Kimmer had this beautiful way that she says that she begins each of her days in gratitude, explicitly expressing gratitude for the life-giving force of the sun, of the plants that feed us or provide shelter for us. And yes, in our preschool world, that does mean that we very cornily say things like, "Thank you, tree. I'm enjoying the smell of your blossom today." Or, "Thank you. I'm going to make the coolest art project out of this leaf." Or, "Thank you, garden, for the peas that we are about to eat." A great way to start this gratitude practice might be to go for a gratitude walk for Earth Day and encourage the children to identify the many different ways that the earth is providing for us. And the main goal of leaning into this connection and this reciprocity is to teach children to cherish the earth. Because the more we model this first do no harm, taking only what you need, expressing gratitude, the more the children can practice doing what they can for the earth now as children, then the more equipped they will be as adults to be the problem solvers that our planet needs. Please join me here next week as I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we go from a progression of learning in nature to learning for nature and what that looks like. Um, it's free. I will see you there.